Sir, company policy prohibits unauthorized insignia. That thing needs to come off now. The store clerk, a young man barely out of his teens, said with a sneer, his fingers actually reaching out and tugging at the single tarnished metal pin to Harold Harry Vance's worn jacket. Harold Harry Vance, at 72, was a man whose life had been etched by service and sacrifice. A seasoned Army veteran from the Vietnam War, he carried the quiet resilience of a generation that had faced unimaginable trials. Now, his days were simpler, filled with the routines of a humble, solitary existence in a small, government-subsidized apartment. But within him, the flame of duty still flickered, a silent testament to the code he lived by. His most treasured possession, rarely displayed but always close, was the Purple Heart he'd earned decades ago. It wasn't a symbol of heroism to him, but a stark, tangible reminder of the day he dragged his wounded platoon sergeant to safety under a relentless hail of enemy fire. It represented survival, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of combat. Today, the anniversary of that harrowing battle, Harry had pinned the actual medal, not a ribbon, but the distinct, heart-shaped decoration itself, to the lapel of his old, clean, but undeniably threadbare jacket. It was a private act of remembrance. He needed a new pair of sturdy walking shoes, his old ones having finally given up the ghost. He headed to Foot Forward Emporium, a large chain shoe store in the downtown mall, hoping to find something affordable and durable. He wasn't looking for trouble, just a decent pair of shoes to ease the persistent ache in his feet. The store was bright, loud, and bustling with young staff, many of whom seemed more engrossed in their phones than their customers. Harry eventually found a sensible pair of walking shoes in his size and headed to the checkout. The clerk on duty was Chad, a young man barely 20, with a bored expression, an ask-you-name tag, and an air of profound indifference. Chad scanned the shoes, announced the price, and then his gaze fixed on the Purple Heart. "Whoa, hold on a sec, Grandpa," Chad said, his tone shifting from boredom to a condescending sneer. "What's that shiny thing on your jacket?" Harry paused, surprised. It's a Purple Heart, son." Chad snorted. "A what?" "Looks like some kind of cheap pin. Store policy says no unauthorized buttons or insignia. Guess that applies to customers trying to make a statement, too. We gotta maintain a professional image here." Harry was taken aback. "This isn't a statement, young man. It's a U.S. military decoration. I earned it." Yeah. Earned it in the big toy soldier war, right?" Chad sneered, clearly enjoying what he perceived as a power play. "Look, I don't care what it is. It looks tacky. Company policy is about maintaining a clean, uncluttered look. That thing violates the spirit of our dress code standards for a family-friendly environment. It needs to come off now." He actually reached across the counter, his fingers making a plucking motion towards Harry's chest. Harry instinctively recoiled, his hand flying up to cover the metal. "You will not touch this," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that had once made hardened soldiers snap to attention. The casual disrespect, the sheer ignorance, was astounding. "This metal represents men who died, son. It represents sacrifice you can't even begin to comprehend." Chad, however, was not a hardened soldier. He was a young, arrogant clerk who saw an old man he could bully. He mistook Harry's protective gesture and low growl as weakness or belligerence. "Oh, getting feisty, are we, old-timer?" Chad taunted, emboldened by his perceived authority and the lack of any immediate supervision. "Look, I told you it comes off. It's distracting. It's probably some fake thing anyway." Before Harry could react further, before his mind could fully process the audacity, Chad leaned further across the counter, his movements quick and shockingly aggressive. He grabbed the Purple Heart, and with a sharp, vicious tug, ripped it from the fabric of Harry's jacket, the pin tearing a small hole. The metal clattered onto the counter. "See, problem solved," Chad said with a triumphant smirk, tossing the metal back towards Harry as if it were a piece of litter. "Now, "Are you going to pay for these shoes or just stand there looking stupid?" Harry stared at the metal lying on the counter, then at the torn fabric of his jacket, then at the sneering face of the clerk. A red mist of fury, an emotion he hadn't felt with such intensity in decades, rose within him. His hands clenched into fists. Years of combat training screamed for a physical response, but years of hard-won discipline and the profound weariness of age held him back. He was shaking, not from fear, but from a deep, soul-searing rage and a profound sense of violation. Other customers nearby had stopped, staring, some with shock, some with nervous amusement. No one stepped in. No manager appeared. Harry slowly reached out, his hand trembling, and picked up his Purple Heart. He didn't look at Chad again. He turned without the shoes, without a word, and walked out of the Foot Forward Emporium, the torn lapel of his jacket a burning testament to the insult he had just endured. He walked out into the mall concourse, found a quiet bench, and sank onto it, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The physical assault on the metal felt like an assault on his very soul, on the memory of every fallen comrade. Sitting on the bench, trying to calm the storm raging within him, Harry fumbled for his phone. His first instinct was to call the police, to report the assault, the temporary theft of his medal. But what would they do? Cite a young punk for being a disrespectful idiot? It felt inadequate. Then he remembered his son, his boy, Michael. Michael, who had followed in his father's footsteps, but had risen far higher. Michael, who was now General Michael Vance, stationed at a nearby base, just an hour's drive away. They weren't particularly close. Years of Harry's own stoic silence and Michael's demanding career had created a respectful distance, but they were blood, and Michael, Harry knew, understood the meaning of that medal in a way few others could. He found Michael's number. His son answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and professional. "General Vance." "Michael," Harry said, his own voice still shaky. It's Dad." There was a fractional pause. Then Michael's tone softened. "Dad, are you okay? You sound off." Harry, his voice tight with emotion, recounted the incident, the shoe store, the arrogant clerk, the mockery, and then the physical act of the medal being ripped from his jacket. He didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. He didn't need to. The facts were damning enough. "He called it a thing, Michael. He ripped it off me like it was trash." Silence on the other end. A heavy, charged silence. Then, "Dad, which Foot Forward? Which mall? Are you still there?" "Northwood Mall," Harry said. "Foot Forward Emporium. I'm on a bench just outside their main entrance. It happened maybe 5-6 minutes ago." "Stay there, Dad," General Vance said, his voice now devoid of any warmth, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp edge. "Do not move. Do not engage with anyone. I am on my way, and I am not coming alone." The line went dead. Harry leaned back, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. He didn't know what Michael meant by "not coming alone," but he knew his son. When Michael Vance said he was coming, he came. And when his voice held that particular tone, it usually meant someone was about to have a very, very bad day. Less than 15 minutes later, a testament to the urgency and perhaps the speed of a military vehicle not overly concerned with civilian traffic laws, the main entrance of the Foot Forward Emporium was suddenly, and very impressively, filled. Not by a single angry son, but by General Michael Vance in his full, immaculate army dress uniform, Class A's, gleaming brass, rows of ribbons testifying to his own distinguished career, his 4 general stars prominent on his shoulders. And flanking him, standing rigidly at attention, were 2 equally imposing command sergeants major, also in full dress uniform, their expressions like granite. The trio didn't stride. They marched into the store, their polished boots echoing on the tiled floor, their combined presence radiating an aura of absolute, non-negotiable authority that silenced the pop music and stopped shoppers in their tracks. Chad the clerk was back at his register, joking with another employee, his earlier triumph still evident. He looked up, annoyed by the sudden hush, and saw the 3 uniformed soldiers heading directly for him. His jaw dropped. His face went from smug to terrified in a nanosecond. General Vance stopped directly in front of Chad's register. He didn't speak immediately. He just stared, his eyes cold and hard, a silent, powerful condemnation. The 2 command sergeants major stood slightly behind him, their gazes equally unyielding, effectively boxing Chad in. "You," General Vance finally said, his voice low, controlled, but carrying the unmistakable weight of command, "are the employee who accosted an elderly gentleman and forcibly removed a United States military decoration, a Purple Heart, from his person approximately 20 minutes ago." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Chad could only nod, dumbstruck, trembling visibly. "My father," the general continued, his voice dropping even lower, becoming even more dangerous. "Warrant Officer 2nd Class Harold Vance, United States Army, retired. A man who bled for this country while you were likely still in diapers." The store manager, a nervous man named Mr. Reynolds, who had been alerted by other staff about the sudden arrival of an army general and his bodyguards, rushed over, wringing his hands. "General, sir, I'm so sorry. There must be some terrible misunderstanding. I had no idea." General Vance cut him off with a look that could freeze fire. "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Reynolds. There is only an act of profound disrespect and, frankly, assault perpetrated by your employee in your store against a decorated combat veteran and my father." He turned his gaze back to Chad, who looked ready to bolt. "That thing you ripped off his chest. It signifies that he shed his blood in service to this nation. It is not costume jewelry. It is not a tacky pin. It is a sacred symbol of sacrifice. And you defiled it. And you defiled him." The general paused, letting his words hang heavy in the air. The entire store was now silent, all eyes on the confrontation at the checkout counter. "You are going to apologize to my father," General Vance stated, his voice like chipped ice. "And then, Mr. Reynolds, you are going to explain to me in very precise detail what disciplinary actions you will be taking against this employee and what remedial training your entire staff will be undergoing to ensure that no veteran, no citizen, is ever treated with such contempt in your establishment again." Just then, Harry, who had been discreetly signaled by one of the command sergeants major, walked slowly back into the store, his Purple Heart now carefully repinned to his torn lapel. He stood beside his son. Chad, under the combined unrelenting gaze of the general, the 2 command sergeants major, and now his victim, finally found his voice, a pathetic squeak. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know. I was wrong." General Vance simply stared at him until Chad looked directly at Harry and repeated his apology, this time with a semblance of sincerity born of sheer terror. "Good," the general said curtly. He then addressed the manager. "Mr. Reynolds, my father came here to buy a pair of shoes. I trust those will now be complimentary, along with a lifetime discount at all Foot Forward Emporium locations for him, as a small token of your store's profound regret." Reynolds nodded vigorously. "Absolutely, General. Of course, anything." The general then put a hand on his father's shoulder. "Dad, let's get you those shoes. And then I'm taking you for the best steak in town." As they walked towards the shoe aisles, leaving a devastated clerk and a frantically appeasing manager in their wake, the 2 command sergeants major remained at the counter, their expressions ensuring no further misunderstandings would occur. The aftermath was swift. Chad was indeed fired on the spot by a corporate directive that came down after a very brief, very intense phone call Reynolds made to his regional manager, likely prompted by the unstated but clearly implied threat of a PR nightmare involving disrespect to veterans by a national chain with a 4-star general as a witness. Foot Forward Emporium's corporate office issued a public apology and announced a company-wide Veterans Respect and Recognition Training Initiative. Harry got his new shoes free of charge and several other pairs besides, insisted upon by his son. The steak dinner was excellent. More importantly, for the first time in a long time, Harry felt seen, truly seen, and defended. His son, the general, hadn't just stood up for him, he'd mobilized. He'd brought the quiet, unwavering authority of the uniform to bear against a petty act of malice. As they left the mall, Michael walked his father to his car. "Dad," he said, "you should never have had to endure that. No one should. That medal." He touched his own rows of ribbons. "It means something. It means everything to those who understand." Harry nodded, his eyes misty. "Thank you, son. You didn't have to." "Yes, Dad," Michael interrupted gently. "I did. Some lines, you don't let anyone cross, especially not when it comes to family, and especially not when it comes to honor earned." The story of the clerk who ripped a medal off a veteran's chest only to have the veteran's son, a 4-star general, and his entourage shut down his little kingdom of disrespect minutes later became a quiet legend passed around local VFW posts and online veteran communities. It served as a potent reminder, you never know who you're dealing with, or who they know. And some symbols, like some bonds, are sacrosanct, defended with a quiet fury that can shake the foundations of even the most arrogant assumptions. Because when you disrespect one soldier, you might just find you've disrespected an entire army, one ready to stand up for its own. The incident at Foot Forward Emporium rippled far beyond the confines of the shopping mall, becoming a powerful, cautionary tale shared across veteran forums and news outlets. The story, now a quiet legend, underscored a profound truth: the seemingly small acts of disrespect could ignite a firestorm of accountability when directed at those who had sacrificed so much for their nation. The company's swift, public apology and the mandated training program across all its branches were widely reported, turning a moment of individual hubris into a nationwide lesson on the value of respect. It was a tangible victory, not just for Harry, but for every veteran who had ever felt overlooked or undervalued in civilian life. For Harry, the immediate relief of the new shoes and the delicious steak dinner with his son was profound, but the deeper impact was emotional. That evening, as they shared stories and memories, the years of unspoken distance between them seemed to dissolve. Michael, the busy general, had shown up not just as an officer, but as a devoted son, fiercely protective of his father's honor. Harry finally felt the weight of decades of quiet stoicism lift. He had always been proud of Michael's achievements, but this act of unwavering defense solidified a bond that transcended rank and duty. It was a reminder that true strength lay not just in military power, but in the unwavering support of family and the collective honor of those who served. The broader societal impact was undeniable. The incident served as a stark reminder that military service often leaves invisible scars, not just visible ones, and that respect for veterans should be an inherent part of the social fabric. It sparked conversations in communities about proper etiquette when encountering military personnel, and how to genuinely honor their contributions rather than inadvertently disrespecting them. For many, it was a wake-up call to pay closer attention, to recognize the sacrifices made, and to treat every individual with the dignity they deserve. The story resonated deeply because it tapped into universal themes: the defense of honor, the strength of family, and the consequences of arrogance. It reminded everyone that true authority comes not from a position of power, but from moral courage and the willingness to stand up for what is right. It celebrated the quiet heroism of those who served, emphasizing that their value doesn't diminish in civilian life. If you believe honor is worth defending, and that family stands together, comment "Respect endures" below. Share this story to remind others that dignity is earned, not given, and should always be protected. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that inspire and remind us of the incredible people around us.